Okay, let's get started. Reading Rails, a visual walkthrough of the source code is the topic that I'm going to talk about. That's RTTP, my username, Twitter handle, X handle, and you will find with that handle everywhere. So, a little bit about me. I used to do a lot of digital nomading, travel, work remotely. I run a company called Betacraft. I also like mechanical keyboards. I always carry and buy new ones whenever I have a talk gets selected. I buy myself a mechanical keyboard as a gift. That's a good excuse. And now that we are here at Rocky Mountain, I just thought to brag about this photo of mine. So this was taken about 10 years back. I drove to this highest motorable road in the world, which is at 18,000 feet. And I sat in the cafe and did a couple of commits on one of the Rails project that I had. And I used to brag that this is the highest altitude Ruby commit that's been done. I know you would think that in the flight you are at maybe 25 to 30,000 high, but that's mocking. That's not the real height, right? Yeah. So I also have this side project called as Tech Talks. I really love finding the good conference talks and watch them and learn from them. So I built this website where I have gathered or collected some of the talks that you can watch. I have seen quite a few from the Boulder area and the Rocky Mountain Conference. So really happy to be here today talking. And then I have a couple of stickers as well. Yeah, this is the company. We are a consulting company, about 40, 50 people. And these are the couple of pictures I clicked in the past 2 days. The weather was really good. And these are pictures just from the phone. I have that another device that you see at the top, a full frame mirrorless camera. But there is something with it, like whenever you click picture, from the time you take the picture until the time it goes to the social media or any of your friends, it takes at least a couple of months. I don't know what's the problem with that, but but that's always something that happens. Yeah. So the weather gods were really happy. All the skies that you see in this picture are real ones. There is no AI in it, so that's there too. Okay, coming to the main point: reading Rails, a visual walkthrough of the source code. Right? So I will quickly tell what all points that are I'm going to cover in this talk, reading Rails. First is why to read the code. Second, why visually we should read the code. Third is how to do that. And fourth is code reading with the AI tools. You know, these days everything has to do like every presentation has to have some mention of the AI. So I got you covered there as well. Okay. Okay, let's start with the why read code. And I always talk about this with a lot of people whom I'm mentoring as well within my company and outside as well. That what happens is sometimes you end up working in a small teams or not the teams that are solving a lot of complex challenges, or some code bases that are too legacy and has gotten really in the bad shape. All in those scenarios, it's always good that you read the code that is written and open sourced by others, because that way what happens is you get to see how others are writing the code, what are some of the best practices that people are following, how they are structuring code, which features they are utilizing, etc. And that's why it is important to read the code. So that's a one part. But the second part is also important, which is that by reading the source code, it is not that you are making your tools or libraries that you are using as just the black boxes. By reading the code, you understand what are the nuances that are there, that are present in the code bases, right? Sometimes you realize, oh, there is this feature that is present in the code and I have never used it. So those movements arise. Then there are certain moments where you realize, oh, I know that I'm using this library for my particular purpose, but given the implementation is done in a such a way, I know how and when it is going to be a roadblock or a issue for me in the future. So to figure out those things, it is important and essential that you do the code reading. Okay. So now the why is out of picture. We go to the next part, which is why visually, right? And there are two reasons for that. The first reason being the impact, and the second being the communication bottlenecks. So let's talk a little bit about the impact part of it, right? Like before getting into that, quickly we'll talk about like some of the challenges in terms of the reading source code. Uh, does anyone here have any questions or challenges that they particularly faced when getting into reading the Rails source code? A line or two, quick. Okay, where to start is one of the challenges. Yes. Right, right. Okay. Yeah, so this is how the Rails source code looks. And we wanted to read this. I mean, you're pretty much convinced that it's hard to get started and start reading the code base, right? If you're not, I can make the fonts even smaller, just to just to make it look very hard. But yeah, and this is the number 64. That's my pet. His name is Buddy. I wanted to guess like what could be this number 64. No ideas. I will just give one more hint. Like last year, I gave a talk or created a talk called as Reading Ruby, a visual journey through the Ruby source code. And at that time, the number was 123. And this time, the number is 64. And this number is just total number of extensions that are present in the Rails source code. In the Ruby, that's a 123. Here, it's a little manageable, 64 only, nothing much, right? So what I wanted to get at is when it comes to reading the source code, what is more important is not what to read, but rather what to ignore. Because there is too much to ignore, and then you will be able to focus on important areas and be able to read the code. Okay, so that's why I wanted to share that. So impact with visual communication. So coming back to that point. So what is it that I mean by the impact, and how does it matter? So I will take a couple of like just one or two concepts and talk about that. So we always talk about like good coding and programming practices, and one of the important area is that we always talk how the coupling should be as minimal as possible. The code should be modular, so that you can refactor and move faster as more and more changes come into your code base, right? Now, we always keep talking about that and talking with the, let's say, some of the juniors who are trying to learn the code bases and everything. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they not get it. But then what I feel is to make an impact and do that communication right, like here is one example. You have a bike and the bike does not have any screw or any bolt at all. The entire bike and all its components are welded together. So if the bulb goes in the headlight, you need a saw and the mechanic to just break it open, change the bulb, and then re-weld it again. And there are certain components here. If they go wrong, you just throw away the bike and get the new bike. I know you are feeling like maybe latest Apple keyboard, Apple laptops like this, but uh, when it comes to the real world things, having everything welded together is something that is really hard to imagine. You would think, oh, this is so weird. Like no one would build a bike where everything is so much welded together that you can't replace or individually consider what are the contracts between two different mechanical components and just replace the one component for another, right? Like replacing suspensions, replacing tires. You just can't even imagine that. But if you think about the code, because it does not have a physical form, you would see that there are so many times these kind of uh, coupling is present, which is very tight, but we never think about it. So what I feel is by having that visualization and comparing that with the real world things, it becomes easier to understand where are the boundaries, where things are going right and where things are going wrong. Here is another example of that. I would like you to guess what this could be. Imagine that you have ordered pizza and then there are not one delivery boy, but many, each one carrying one piece of pizza, not the entire one in one go. That's n plus one. Right? So that's why I feel that the visual has much more better communication and impact compared to just reading the text. And the second important one, I feel, is the communication bottlenecks. And that too, especially with the AI. So what's happening is with the AI, it is possible to write so much code so fast, maybe write a good code as well as the bad code. What becomes important is to be able to understand so much of code. The humans are becoming more of a bottleneck. So there has to be more communication methods. And I feel having that visual angle can certainly help in that aspect. Like one example I could give is a lot of our clients these days, instead of giving a specification document, they just wipe code something and then they sell that idea or concept where people are ready to pay for it. And then once it's sold, then they come to us and tell us, okay, this is exactly what we need, make it production ready. And we just throw away the code and build everything from scratch again, right? Sometimes, very rarely, the code is good enough that a refactor can make it production ready. But the most important part here is that the communication is happening with the code, which is like a very detailed form of communication tool. Instead of having a specification sheet where if the idea is 100% in the brain, and then 90% in the specification. The developer gets only 60%, and in the code it comes only the 50%. So there is so much of a loss happening at the every stage, right? So yeah, that's why also again the visualizations are important. So we talked about, okay, why we need to read the code. And we also talked about, okay, why visually reading the code is important and communication is better with that. The next part that we will come to is how. How do we do that? And for that, I have built this website called as Visual Rails. So last year when I did visual talk for the Ruby, I thought I can't simply have very boring graphs and stuff. It needs to be really flashy and interesting and 3D and all. And it was 2024, right? So the Gen AI was there. So I created lots of images and everything, and it was like that. But this year, now that we are 1 year into it, and the models and the LLM has progressed so much, I thought no, like simply having the graphs and charts is not going to suffice. We need to have something that is also people can interact with. So it's a visuals plus interactivity is something that I need. So that's why I built this website Visual Rails, and this is how it looks. So for example, this is where we start. So we have Rails, and all of these components are listed here along with their relationships. And the good part, you can pick something and then move around as well. Like, seems interesting, yeah. So let's go to the more useful ways of utilizing this. So I will just move to the hierarchy mode of the visualization. So here we have a Rails application. We have mainly a rail tie, and then all of the important components: action cable, mailer, action pack, action view, active job, active record, action mailbox, action text, active storage, and active model. You will see that in terms of the active support, there are a lot of lines coming in, and that's kind of making everything a little fuzzy. So I have also added an option to remove the active support so that the lines are a little lesser and the diagram looks a little cleaner. And that's also one of the important point to talk about when it comes to the active support. Like I have seen a lot of developers, sometimes what happens with them is they work for very long in a Rails application space. And then when they need to write any Ruby code that is outside of Rails, they really struggle in terms of finding the good methods and everything. And the reason for that is active support. Because in the active support, because of the active support, the Ruby itself is getting so much powerful within the Rails ecosystem that it becomes very hard to find that boundary between just the Ruby and the Ruby inside the Rails. So the best option, again, if you like all of those methods, is to just take the active support and utilize that. But we will move to the next part. Now that we know how the hierarchy-wise it looks, let me click on the active support. So this shows some notes about, okay, what are the dependencies and a bit of ideas about what the active record does. And if I click on it again, yeah. So again, it becomes useless, right? How do you read this, right? So there is a one option here, which is a tree, that makes it a little more bearable, wherein you have all these methods correctly being shown and the associations are correctly present, right? But then even this is not most useful. So what I did was I added one more type of exploration to this, because this all thing that we are looking at is something that is all about looking at associations and relationships and whatnot, right? So when it is, let me just go back. Yeah. So when you want to have a look at the relationships, this works great. But then let's move to the collapsible tree. And this is the magic is. I know it is not readable for a lot of you, but that's fine, because it's not like you're not supposed to read it as such. You can always open the website and read it. What I wanted to show was just graphically and visually how you can put together the things. So here what I have is a Rails, and then if I click on the Rails, it opens up all the important gems or the core gems in the Rails. And then at the here there is an action mailer. So I can click on that and it shows all the important modules that are there in the action mailer. And there is this one, which is action mailer queue delivery. So I can just hide the empty ones. What it does is just removes a little bit of more of a complexity, because as a beginner, when you are getting into this and reading the code base, you don't want to bother too much about the internal implementations. Rather, you want to focus on the, okay, what is the public API that I should be focusing on? To make it more simpler and easier to get into. Okay, so I click on the action mailer, and these are all the classes that are there. Let's click on the first one, and then there are sub modules, and then I click on the very first one, and then I have all the instance methods and the class methods that are present inside of it, right? And then the previous example that we looked at, wherein I opened up active record and it was getting very crazy. Let's try that in this mode. So now it looks like this. So a little more manageable. Now if I click on active record, again, a very big list, and then something, and then something. If anything, you would find this funny and entertaining to keep clicking on and keep reading on. And that's the overall idea. Yeah. Okay. So that's the collapsible tree and how it works. So this overview and the collapsible tree are the two modes where you're not focusing on any specific thing. You're just randomly coming into the code base and trying to understand what's associated with what, how I can go deeper and deeper and explore the code base more. Of course, once you look at the things here, what is expected is to go into the real source code, but this is like kind of the map, and then once you know where you need to go, then you zoom in onto the code base, and that's like zooming in onto the map. That's the idea. Okay. So that's the overview on collapsible tree. But then there are other ways to also read through the code base, and I have some graphical examples of that. But let's also quickly look at that. The first one being the database query flow. So in this one, it is a list of core components and overview of what goes into those core components. And I have added like 6 pages on this page. So the first page is just the simple core components overview. The second one, you will see that, okay, it has a lazy query initialization. If I click on the notes icon here, it will show me what all things are happening here. And what's happening here is I'm simply doing a user.where email user@example.com. So the query is getting generated, but I'm not actually executing it, or I'm not calling .2a on it. So the SQL is not getting fired. So this is like a very bare bone active record database query. And overall, the idea in these 6 pages is that when you use active record to do something with your database, fetching the data or writing the code back into the database, what all things are happening. So the direction of reading the code in this case is, I know this particular flow that I use day to day. How can I dig deeper into that and understand it more deeply and better? So this is the lazy query initialization, meaning that the query is not actually hitting the database. Then the next one is simple query, wherein I'm doing user.where something and dot first. So now the database is actually getting touched and the data is being retrieved, and which all things are getting touched in the process, and what is the overall execution flow and the details about that, right? Then the next is a query with the joins. So in this one, it's a step higher in terms of the complexity level. So we started with something where it was just an overview. The second one was a query where it is not touching database. The second one was query which is touching database. The third, which one we are looking at, is the query with the joins. Then the complex query with the includes. Next is SQL generation pipeline. So overall, with these 6 flows, it kind of completes the entire flow as to explain what all things get touched and how the code can be read when you're looking into understanding how the active record is overall working. The second example use case that I have created is HTTP request flow. So in this one, what's happening is on the very first page itself, I have created this diagram, which is for before the request hits the Rails application. So this is like a typical interview question that gets asked, that when you open a Rails application in your browser, what all things are happening before the user is getting the response back, right? And there is quite a lot happening even before the request hits your Rails application. Like there could be a browser cache and it gets rendered from that itself. So the request is not coming to the server. Then there is a CDN cache and the request is returning from the CDN cache itself. Then there is a web server static files that you have on the production, wherein your HTTP server itself is looking into the public directory and rendering your files instead of Rails application at all coming into the picture. Then there is a load balancer, health checks, rate limiting, security related blocks, etc. So all of these examples of, okay, what all things could be possible where the request does not even hit the Rails application and is going back. So this is the second use case where we are trying to read the code base from the point of view of the entire requests life cycle throughout the Rails application. So let's go to the next page, and this is about route direct response, wherein what's happening is the request is coming in, but the route itself is sending a response back. So the Rails application and the rest of code is not even being touched. The next one is, okay, now it was returned from the routes. Let's say the request comes up to the middleware and then gets returned. Then there is a controller text, like request comes up to the controller and then the response goes back. Then what happens? and then controller with view, and then controller with model and view. So at every step, the complexity level is getting increased, so that you can see, okay, which all components and files and modules from the Rails application are coming into picture. And then you can reference this to go back into the Rails source code and read that. So that's a one other way of reading that. This is a multi-modal request, this is an API JSON request, and the last one is a streaming request. And then the last one is something that I also really liked. This was something that I really wanted to understand, which is like a Rails boot process. How does the Rails application boots up, and the flows related to that. So there are about 12 of those, and then there are notes about what needs to be done. So that's in short overall the visual Rails. This is like an open source project. You can access it right now also. And there is a channel. If you have any suggestions or if you want to contribute, let me know, and I should be able to contribute on that. So we looked into why read code, why visuals, how we are going to read the code visually, the examples that I shown. The next part that we will get into is code reading with the AI tools. Yeah. Okay, so before we go into that, just one fun mention that I wanted to do was of the Ruby Varnac. So this is another of a side project that I have, again open source, that you can look into. And the motivation behind this one was that I wanted to make it easy for anyone who does not have English as their native language to learn programming. So do you know there is 92% of the world population who does not have English as their first language? Okay, 92%. So for them, the first thing is to learn English as a spoken language, and then the next step is to learn the programming. And with that, what happens is things like foobar and all just isn't as appealing to understand as a code examples, right? So I built this and I gave a talk about this about 10 years back, 2015 at RubyConf India, and I had like 500 people as audience, and I got lots of laughs, lots of claps, and then even some whistles. And that kind of enthusiasm can only come if the content, like, all of that looking at the code. Like, can you imagine people going or liking code that much or getting entertained by the code that much, right? So that's the power of having code in your own native languages. So here is one example. This is the code that is written in Hindi, entirely end to end, and this can be executed. And this refers to one of the movies from the Hindi. And since then, it's been translated into these many languages. This entire project is being developed with a philosophy called as a CDD-based development. Heard of that? CDD? Conference-driven development. So when I went to Thailand to talk, it was translated to Thai, and then it was translated to Spanish when I was traveling to US. How many people here understand Spanish? Oh, nice. Does this seem funny? Yeah. I mean, AI told me that this is funny. I don't speak Spanish, but this is like something like this is possible, wherein you are actually writing the code not with the foo bar, but something that is very native to the local jokes, movies, and folklore, and include that in your code, and then it becomes relatable. Firstly, it becomes entertaining, and secondly, it becomes deeply understanding. Something that you can't understand in English, you should be able to understand in your spoken languages. Yeah, and if you are not entertained by this so far, here is something that would entertain you. This is Ruby emoji. So this is entire code written with the emojis, and if you execute it, it works. So that's also possible with the Ruby overlay, writing all the code with the emojis and no words, right? So yeah, if this is something that excites you and you feel that somewhere it could be used for teaching and learning, let me know and we could have a chat about that as well after the talk. So coming back to the main topic, how to read the code better with the AI tools. That's the last point that we are going to cover. So what I feel is when it comes to the classical approach without AI, the way we read the code is from the bottom to top, meaning that I would look at the Rails source code, firstly spend a couple of hours or days or months thinking about, okay, where to start. And then once I start, I will look at, okay, some part, some component, and slowly I will go line by line, function by function, and then class by class, and then module by module, so that slowly I am building a picture in my head as to what is the architecture overall. So that's like a bottom to top approach. And that's something that we follow not just in the Rails or Ruby source code, but also for the Rails applications also, where we start with some understanding on the business side and then get into the code base where we are like reading through the code and just building, okay, how the developer has structured the application architecture and whatnot. Uh, what I feel is that with the AI, now it's possible to have a top to bottom approach also, wherein you start at a place where you ask AI to go through the code and build a top level view. Obviously, you always have to consider 10% of hallucinations or other issues like that, but take it up as a challenge that you have to work around, that you have a mentor who can always be 10% wrong. And the reason for that is you are always on your best attitude to look into the code base and not get lazy. It's just a feature, not a bug, right? So this kind of a top to bottom approach is possible. And I mean, tools are not important. It can be done with all kinds of tools. But what I personally like is Cloud Code. Codex Gemini, CLI is something also can go there. And the other thing that is really something that I love is the notebook, wherein you can sometimes just build a combined.txt file or something, wherein you're simply writing a script that reads all the gem code. Like for example, for this was done for the shrine. So what I did was took the entire shrine code, put it into a .txt file one after another, where comments were added to tell which file is which, etc. Put it into the notebook and then have a discussions, because with the notebook it make sure that what all responses that it's providing are grounded into the code base and not something hallucinated. So that grounding feature is what makes this very interesting, right? So overall, the tips wise, I would say when it comes to summarization, basically the top to bottom approach, what you're doing is asking AI to read the code and then summarize for you. So in that case, there are two to three different level of summarizations that's possible. So for example, I could ask it to summarize something like a Rails boot process, and it can come back with 75 pages long answer, right? And that's too much to read, right? 75 pages. So that's a one level of the summarization. The second could be summarization of summarization, or even a shorter ones. But overall, the idea would be to start with something that is shortly summarized, and then something that is a little more, and then something that is little more, and then you should be able to jump into the code base. So that kind of speeds up overall code reading process that is there. The second option, obviously the visualize, the way I'm doing it here for the Rails, that can be done. And finally, the secret ingredient obviously is just the curiosity, right? Yeah, so overall the conclusion, I would say there are some open problems, like this was something for visualizing the Rails source code, but the styles code and the techniques that are being followed here is something that can also be used for the entire Rails application visualization. And what the way this Rails visualization code base is being built is that there is a Ruby script. Its job is to go through the entire Rails source code that is cloned locally, and then looking at that role source code, this script generates a JSON data, which is like 6-7 MBs long, which has all the details about all the classes, their modules, then the classes, and then the public methods and the class methods, etc. And then this entire data is utilized by the D3.js on the front end to visualize it. So when it comes to that visualization process, you can be guaranteed that, okay, there are no hallucination, because it's the script that's generating the data, not the AI itself writing into the data, right? So that's the main thing. Yeah, so in terms of the Rails application visualization, that's possible. And then can it be used to visualize any of the gem code, like the example I showed about Shrine? Can that be done? So these are like open things. It's not the features that are added yet. So it's open source. So if this is something that you find exciting, yeah, sure, something to consider. The next conclusion wise, I would say nothing else. Just have fun. That's the thing. Thanks to some of the other contributors. That's all my talk. Thank you. Okay, I think we might have a couple of minutes for questions. One or two. Yeah, so the question is, there are a lot of information in the overall Git history that tells how the code was evolved, or certain decisions or architectural things were decided. Has this project explored that? So far, no. But there are some experiments that are being done in this code base where it's combining the deterministic script that goes through the code base and does the static analysis to generate the data that is being visualized, and combine that with some amount of the prompts and agents that can work on top of that to create some summaries, which will quickly give the description of what exactly we are looking at. But that's a good idea. Like so far we haven't considered looking into the Git history, but that could be a good insight too. Yes. So the very first version that I had done back in 2015, at that time I had changed some of the things in the Ruby source code itself and then recompiled it. So every time, or for anyone who wanted to use this Rails Varnac, they had to recompile the Ruby as instructed and then utilize it. And the performance impact that time was pretty minimal because what's happening here is English or any other foreign languages or Unicode, everything is UTF-8. So for Ruby, it doesn't matter what's coming in as long as it knows how it is defined, right? But the newer versions of the Ruby Varnac, they are not depending on that. They are using the transpilers that are sitting in between to change things before they hit actual the Ruby MRI. And the reason it's being done is the main focus for that is entertainment and education, not the production. So it doesn't matter much. Yeah. Yeah. That would be a favor to not use it in production, for sure. Thank you.